Good evening, and welcome tonight. Let's drift back in time, hundreds of years, to a city in medieval Europe, but we won't be visiting knights and princesses. Instead, we'll seek out the simple, comforting, and sometimes surprising foods that the common folk held dear. So dim the lights, listen for the distant bells, and let our story begin. You open your eyes and find yourself standing before the heavy stone gate of a walled city. The last rays of sunset are staining the sky a deep, warm orange. The air is thick with a mixture of smells, damp earth, wood smoke, the faint scent of animals, and the musty, lived-in smell of a city settling down for the night. You take a deep breath as if you could inhale its entire history. A gate guard, leaning against the wall, gives you a lazy glance, and with a simple wave lets you pass inside. Stepping through the gate, you are swept into a gentle river of people. The streets are narrow, and the timber-framed houses lean towards each other, their upper windows almost close enough to touch. They slice the darkening sky into a thin ribbon above you. The path under your feet isn't smooth cobblestone, but a soft mix of mud and earth. You pull your wool cloak a little tighter, feeling the day's chill. The solemn peal of a church bell echoes over the rooftops, calling out the evening hour, but it's soon lost among more earthly sounds. Women chatting in doorways, children chasing a scrawny dog with happy shrieks. The final twin clang, 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 clang from a blacksmith's forge. The air hums with 1,000 quiet conversations. There are no streetlights here. As the darkness deepens, shopkeepers begin to board up their doors. Candlelight flickers in the windows, making shadows dance like tall, thin ghosts on the walls. Then another bell rings out, louder and faster than the churches. It is the curfew bell. The name comes from the old French for, which means to cover the fire. In a city built of wood, where every home had an open hearth for cooking and warmth, a single stray spark could be a disaster. When this bell rang, every family had to put out their fires or cover them safely for the night. You see people quicken their steps, heading home. Wooden shutters are latched. The night here feels real, a deep darkness that holds a quiet danger. You clutch the few copper coins in your pocket. It's time to find something to eat before the city completely settles into sleep. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you of a long day's journey. Just as you start to feel a little lost, a rich, wonderful smell cuts through the air. It's the scent of seared, caramelized fat, of hot flour, and some kind of slow-cooked meat. It pulls you in a new direction. You follow it without thinking, and at a small street corner you find its source. A man, we'll call him the Pie Man, stands by a small wooden cart. On the cart is a little oven made of clay, its opening glowing with a warm red light. On a board in front of him are rows of golden brown meat pies, each one the size of your fist. Steam whispers from a small vent cut into the top of each crust, carrying that irresistible aroma. A single candle flickers on the cart, lighting up the pie-man's smiling face. You step forward and point to the most perfect-looking pie. With a quick movement, he wraps it in a piece of rough cloth and hands it to you. It's hot, and the warmth feels good in your hands. You give him 2 copper coins. What is inside? You ask, he winks, leans in, and whispers, "Fresh rabbit, friend. Hunter brought it in from the woods this morning." You step away, leaning against a cool stone wall. You carefully unwrap the cloth. The pie crust gleams in the dim light. You hesitate for just a moment, and then take a big bite. Crunch. The crust is thick, but surprisingly crisp. Immediately, the hot, savory filling and thick gravy rush into your mouth. The flavor is wonderful. The meat is tender, mixed with herbs and just a hint of pepper. You eat it eagerly, forgetting all your doubts. This is the perfect medieval street food, the meat pie. But as you eat, you notice how thickeningly thick and hard the pastry is. This was a special feature of medieval pies. The outer shell was called a thitins, a coffin. A strange name, but it described its job perfectly. It was, first and foremost, a container, an edible baking dish that sealed in all the juices and flavors. In wealthy homes, this hard crust was often thrown away or given to the servants. But for common folk, it was a filling, if chewy, part of the meal, and did you really believe it was fresh rabbit? All sorts of funny stories and poems were told about what went into street pies. Some said they were made with stray cats or dogs, and some whispered of even stranger things. Every pie was a little gamble, but maybe that uncertainty was part of the adventure. You look at the half-eaten pie in your hand. The flavor seems a little more complex now. Still, you finish every last bite. It was hot, it was fragrant, and you were hungry, and in this time and place a full stomach was more important than the truth. The rich pie was delicious, but it leaves you feeling a little heavy. You feel you need something warm and simple to settle your stomach. You continue walking and turn a corner. Here, a different kind of crowd is gathered. A woman stands behind a massive black iron pot, which hangs over a crackling fire. A humble, clean scent of vegetables and grain rises with the steam. People are lined up, holding simple wooden bowls. The woman uses a long ladle to scoop a thick stew into each person's bowl. 1 scoop, 1 bowl. You see the price, 1 penny for a bowl of soup. For half a penny more, she'll drop a chunk of dark, hard bread into the bottom of your bowl. First you decide to splurge. Since you don't have a bowl, she gives you one made of coarse earthenware. She puts the bread in, then ladles the hot soup over it. The dry bread immediately soaks up the liquid, softening like a sponge. You find a step to sit on and take your first spoonful. The soup is thick with chopped cabbage, carrots, onions, barley, and beans. The flavor is simple, just a basic saltiness, but it is wonderfully fried hot. The warmth spreads from your throat all through your body, chasing away the night chill and soothing your stomach. You easily mash the soft bread at the bottom with your spoon, making the stew even more hearty and filling. This dish is called swin pottage and it was the daily food for most ordinary people in the Middle Ages. For poor families, this big pot was always on the fire. Each day the cook would add whatever new ingredients they could find. Vegetable roots, a handful of grain, leftover bones. The stew was never empty, always simmering, always changing. You finish the last spoonful and return the bowl. Though it was simple, on this cold night, this bowl of hot pottage feels just as satisfying as the surprising meat pie. With a warm belly, you feel ready to explore a little more. You pass a bakery. It is closed for the night, but the sweet smell of honey, spices, and baked bread still drifts through the cracks in the door. The scent makes you suddenly crave something sweet. You close your eyes and imagine the simple sweets a common person might enjoy. Perhaps an apple, roasted over a fire on a wooden stick, brushed with a little precious honey until it was soft and fragrant. Or maybe a sturdy, spicy gingerbread made from breadcrumbs, honey, and ginger. It was more like a dense cake than the crisp cookies we know today. Or simplest of all, just chewing on a piece of honeycomb wax and all, for a pure, intense sweetness that could make you happy for a whole day. Now let your thoughts drift to another world. The scene melts away, and you find yourself inside a brightly lit Castle hall. Long tables are covered in white linen. Silverware gleams. Nobles in silk and velvet are feasting. As the banquet nears its end, servants carry in the final, most amazing dish. On a massive tray is not food to be eaten, but an intricate white castle, sculpted entirely from chouvid sugar paste and marzipan. It is a work of art, a magnificent dessert called a subtlety. Its purpose was not to be eaten, but to be a breathtaking display of wealth. In medieval Europe, sugar was as expensive as gold, and was even called Sundef white gold. Only the most powerful lords could afford to use so much of it to create these fantastic edible sculptures. You continue your walk through the city streets. A burst of noise draws your attention. It comes from a sturdy-looking building where warm light spills from the cracks in the door. You hear men laughing and singing. This is a tavern. You push open the heavy wooden door. A wave of warmth hits you, thick with the smell of ale, sweat, and wood smoke. The room is packed. At long wooden tables sit all kinds of people, craftsmen after a hard day's work, travelling merchants, and a few friars enjoying a quiet drink. This is the social heart of the city at night. Your eyes are drawn to a sizzling pot of oil near the bar. A woman is scooping out golden, irregularly shaped pieces of dough. She sprinkles them with salt and piles them on a plate. These are the tavern's most popular snack, fried dough morsels like fritters. You buy a small plate. They're almost too hot to touch. You blow on one and take a bite. The outside is crispy, the inside soft and chewy. The dough itself is plain, but the coarse salt on the surface gives a sudden burst of flavor. It is a simple, rustic food, but it's perfectly designed for drinking. The saltiness makes you thirsty, and you find yourself instinctively wanting a big gulp of cool ale to wash it down. This was perhaps the earliest form of side commercial strategy. Tavern owners knew that these cheap, salty snacks would make people drink and sell much more ale. The food was no longer just for hunger. It was a clever tool. You watched the men at a nearby table playing a game with dice, laughing loudly. The tavern was a complicated place. The church often called it a den of sin, but for many working people, it was one of the few places they could relax, connect, and find a little comfort away from the hardships of life. It was both a rowdy escape and a quiet sanctuary. Chewing on the last piece of dough, you realize you freerly do want a pint of ale. You finally give in and order a drink. It is a type of ale called Sismol Beere. It's very light and refreshing, with a low alcohol content and a faint, malty sweetness. It's the perfect thing to quench the thirst from the salty snack. Feeling refreshed, you leave the tavern and wander towards the city's docks. Here, a small night market is still buzzing with light and activity, serving the sailors and workers coming home late. As you get closer, a strong, salty, fishy smell fills the air. You see stalls with large wooden barrels, piled high with salted and dried fishy. A vendor pulls out a huge, stiff, dark yellow fish. It is as hard as a piece of wood. This is swensalt cod, or swenstockfish. In a time before refrigeration, salt was the key to preserving food. Fish was gutted, layered with huge amounts of salt, and left to dry in the air for a long time. This dried fish could be stored for months, providing precious protein for people far from the sea. You see other barrels of fish preserved in brine and vinegar, and smoked fish hanging from the rafters. Their skins are deep reddish brown. The smell is intense. This could be the famous avidred herring, a fish so heavily salted and smoked that its scent was strong enough. Some said to train hunting dogs. These preserved foods were essential for survival. They were salty, intense, and maybe not a delicacy, but a piece of salt cod with some dark bread, and ale was a deeply satisfying meal for a working person. The flavor was born from necessity, but over time it became a familiar, comforting taste of home. In another corner of the market, you smell something different. A rich, slightly sharp, milky aroma. You find a stall piled with huge, round wax, yellow wheels of thindish hard cheese. A vendor is using a special knife to cut a wedge from one of the giant wheels. Cheese was the medieval energy bar. It was concentrated milk packed with protein and fat. Because it had very little moisture, it could last for a long time and was easy to carry. For laborers, pilgrims, and soldiers, a chunk of cheese and a loaf of bread was the perfect meal for a long journey. But, strangely, cheese didn't have a very good reputation among the upper classes and doctors of the time. They believed in a theory of the four humasid, which said the body needed to be in balance. They thought cheese was a fooled and wetted food that was hard to digest and could cause sickness. It is funny to think that a food considered unhealthy by the elites was a treasure for the working people, and also for the monks in monasteries who became some of the world's greatest cheesemakers. It makes you realize that whether a food is seen as good or bad often has more to do with culture and class than with science. The city night deepens, but one small square is still growing noisier. A festival fair is being set up for the next day. The air is filled with happy energy and the smell of sweets and roasted meat. Festivals were a welcome break from the hardships of daily life, and the special sign festival foods, seta, were the best part of the celebration. You see a vendor making the ancestor of the fried waffle, baking thin, patent cakes in a special iron press over a fire. He sprinkles them with sugar and cinnamon, and the sweet smell makes the children nearby stop and stare. At another stall, a woman sells small bowls of golden custard, a smooth, rich pudding made from milk, eggs, and sugar, a true luxury for most people. You look at the happy faces in the square and understand something new about these simple treats. On special days they were not just food, they were a vehicle for ritual, a thedalist for joy. On ordinary days life was full of rules and restraint. A festival was a time to let go, to indulge, to celebrate. The special festival snacks were the sweet reward for all the hard work. Thiaf. After so many rich and savory things, your body feels parched. In our time, you would look for water, but in the Middle Ages that was a risky choice. The rivers were often polluted, and even well water could be unsafe. So what did people drink? The answer was on almost every table: fermented beverages. The safest, most common drink was the Findrei small beer you tried in the tavern, because the water used to make it was boiled, and because of the alcohol and hops, it was much safer to drink than raw water. But it was also nutritious. It was full of carbohydrates and vitamins from the malt. For people whose diets were often monotonous, this light beer was like a sports drink, vitamin water, and liquid bread all in one. It quenched thirst and provided energy, and was drunk by men, women, and even children every day. Our world thinks of water as healthy and alcohol as an indulgence. But in the Middle Ages, it was the opposite. A low-alcohol, nutritious beer was the safe, healthy choice. It shows how much our ideas about food and drink are shaped by the world around us. The entire culinary journey of the evening is finally coming to an end. You find a simple room in a modest inn. Lying on a bed with a straw mattress, you can hear the city outside has finally fallen quiet. In the silence, you can hear the sounds of your own body. Your stomach is gently protesting. The greasy pie, the simple pottage, the salty dough. They are all having a party in your stomach, leaving you feeling a little bloated, a little uncomfortable. You toss and turn and wonder. If someone in the Middle Ages felt this way, what would they have done? They might have had a popular bedtime drink called fin positiv. It was made by mixing hot milk with wine or ale, which would make the milk curdle into soft flakes, spiced with sugar and cinnamon. It was thought to be a warm, pre-digested drink that could soothe the stomach and help you sleep. You lie in the darkness, feeling the mild discomfort in your belly, and you realize this feeling is a bridge across time. Hundreds of years ago, another traveller, after eating a little too much on their journey, might have lain in a bed just like this one, feeling the very same way. The theories were different, but the feeling, that honest, slightly regretful signal the body sends after a good meal, is a universal human experience. History is no longer just words in a book. You can feel it in your own body. Our complex relationship with food, filled with temptation and comfort, has not really changed at all. And with that thought, your eyelids grow heavy. The churning in your stomach seems to quiet down, and in the deep, quiet darkness of this medieval city, you are finally ready to fall asleep. Good night, men.